This is Vogue Stories, audiobooks by Kathy Colas, and today I have with me Dawn Kohler, the author of The Messages. I recently narrated this book and found the story absolutely amazing. It was soul-bearing and poignant and intense, and I'm really excited to talk about it with Dawn today. So, Dawn, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for just the incredible work you did to truly capture the emotion and the inspiration behind this journey. I know well, I can imagine it would have been a difficult book to narrate. So thank
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was truly my pleasure. And yeah, honestly, it brought out so many emotions in me that I think it's probably some of my best work. So thank you. So just to get started, when we kind of get into the story, you've got a pretty nice little life going on, right? I mean, you're the owner of a very successful tech company in California. You've got three beautiful children. You've got a wonderful husband that you've known since you're 16, your high school sweetheart. Pretty much living the dream. So, what happened?
In many ways, I was. It was hectic, but I loved being married. I loved having young children at home, and I really enjoyed the work I was doing. It was a good time in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. So, what changed?
Well, it did change, and it changed fairly quickly.
Mhm.
One morning, I woke up into a very strong feeling in my chest. It was as if I was receiving a calling, a spiritual calling.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not religious and I don't have any context for this. So, for the most part, I just did my best to try to ignore it and get on with my life. But it continued, it persisted. Then, about a month later, I pulled up to the office to go to work
Mhm.
and I couldn't get out of my car. My hand wouldn't actually open the car door. My
Wow.
body wouldn't move in a way you need to move to get out of a vehicle. And I knew at the time that I was physically able, but I was psychologically paralyzed. I couldn't move. So I fought with myself because I really wanted to go to work. I enjoyed my work. I was
Sure.
looking forward to going in and talking to the team and pulling the reports and doing what I did every day of the week.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling to get out of the car. I can't move. And about 20 minutes later, I hear this inaudible voice in my mind, and it said, "This is no longer your way." And I really didn't have any choice but to turn around and to go home.
Wow. So you hear the voice and you're not thinking, this is the voice of God, because as you said, you're not religious. So, and like you said, you're healthy. You're not having a stroke. You're not having an aneurysm. You get yourself home. And so what happens next? What did you do?
Well, again, I didn't really have any context for it. I wasn't raised in a religious family. So what I did is, the practical thing, which is
Yeah.
I called the doctor, arranged an appointment, and had a medical test to say, I've got this feeling. There was a lot of high anxiety around it
Yeah.
because it was so unusual. And the doctor ruled out any medical conditions. So, next logical step, go to a therapist. So I went to a
Absolutely.
therapist and explained the sensations to her.
Wow. And so the therapist diagnosed you as having a spiritual awakening?
I don't think it was a diagnosis as much as it was validation.
Mm.
Every cell in my body was telling me I was getting the calling. I felt the summons to a power greater than my own. And at that point, I just wanted to know why.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, God, just send me a memo and I'll get this, whatever it is you want done.
Send me a memo.
I was not looking for a one on one.
Wow.
But, apparently that is not how these things work.
Not that anybody has any background or experience, right, in how these things work, except maybe the Dalai Lama. He might have a little direct line, but I don't think most of us do. So I love Anne, who's the therapist, right? And what I really loved about her is that she was honestly open to saying that this is a spiritual calling. She wasn't trying to push it off as something else. Like maybe you have schizophrenia, or maybe you're, you're really you're going insane. Not that a therapist would say that, but I just loved her openness and ability to embrace that with you. And I think that that was a really big part of the book. So, you know, one of the things I really like too is when you say you raised yourself. I really identified with that. So, even though you lived with your parents, this is what you told her. So, let's talk about that for a minute. Raising yourself.
I did, and I told her my parents really were not a factor in my life. I did believe that at the time. And that is how I remember feeling as a child, that I knew early on, I'm on my own here. These
Yeah.
folks aren't competent enough to raise me. So I took it upon myself to be raising myself.
Right.
I think it was also a clue to Anne that I might need to do some personal healing around my parental issues.
Yes, absolutely. There is a reason you feel like you're raising yourself and cutting off. So, and one of the things Anne says, and this is something, another line that I love and I relate to, that whatever happening in your present is coming upon you because of things that happened in the past. So, in order to sort of break through, you have to examine what happened because the only way you're going to find what your calling truly is to clear the path, right?
Right.
So she really made you go back, right?
Yes. She said to me, and she was correct, the unresolved past is always in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to heal and reconcile those parts of ourselves in order to understand our callings.
Sure.
I was frustrated by that. The thought of going back to my childhood was not a path I wanted to take.
Right. Well, but you did.
I did, only because I had to. Once I left work, the anxiety got worse, and the emotions and experience I had repressed from my childhood started to come into my conscious awareness.
Yeah.
And within really just a few weeks of leaving work, I was flooded with feelings of shame and abandonment that were becoming excruciating.
And at that point, you started to recall the childhood abuse, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
The
what was,
sexual abuse, excuse me. It
yeah,
was sexual abuse, which is
yes.
right.
Yeah.
So,
So what was confusing about it, well, all of it was confusing, but on one hand, I knew I was receiving the spiritual calling.
right.
And on the other hand, I am now mired in feelings, body sensations, and visual memories of sexual abuse as a young child, and
Mm-hmm.
the horrible self-loathing thoughts that I had because of it.
Sure.
It was like I was going through a purification process, and all the sludge that I didn't even know I held in my body
Yeah.
was being released so it could be cleared
Oh, well, you must have felt a lot lighter, right?
eventually.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, what was also happening during this purification, this detoxification, if you will, is that you were falling in love very deeply. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Doesn't everybody fall in love with their therapist?
Not that way. Not how you did. So, so let's get into that a little.
Fair. It was unusual. And the in love I felt for her was very layered. At its core, it was such a deep love for the light that I saw in her,
Mhm.
the light I think that we all have in us. And she was also mirroring my soul. And that's something that part of child abuse, you're really blinded to yourself, to your own essence, to your own soul. So, somewhere along the line in your life, if you're lucky enough to meet somebody that can reflect that back,
Mhm.
it really becomes an intense time of healing because that part of you is wanting to be seen and it's wanting for you to travel back to it. And that was, in essence, what was happening. But what was also very true about the relationship was, Anne was my first maternal bond. I
Mhm.
never had that with my mother. And here I was suddenly 32 years old, a mother myself.
Right.
And all of a sudden, my mother wounds were coming to the surface to be healed. And really, just my whole body yearned to be held, to be safe, to feel loved and protected by a woman.
Mm.
You know, It was really quite intense. Childhood emotions are so, so strong.
Yeah. Did you think it was sexual in any way? Did any of those kinds of feelings come into play with this?
No, they actually never did. Um, Sex would have degraded the love I felt for her. It was so much deeper than that.
Yeah, it sounds like it was quite pure. Well, I don't want to give anything away, but it sounds like this deep love, this intense bond that you felt with her was truly a catalyst for your healing. Is that correct?
It was, and it was in a very unexpected way. It took some interesting twists and turns, as
Uh-huh.
you know, since you read the book.
Mhm.
Um, so it did, and ultimately the experience in that relationship. I think we're wounded in relationships. I think we heal in relationships. I was able to access, release, and rewrite the beliefs I told myself about me
Mhm.
and about love.
Wow. So it was a very successful therapeutic experience, no doubt. And during your relationship, excuse me, during your relationship with her, you continue to get messages, right? And a lot of these messages are things that are the higher power is wanting you to direct to Anne. Is that correct?
I was getting my own messages directed to me. And then there was a point in time where I started to get a few messages to direct her.
It's
And at
like
the
call
time,
Anne directly, right? Just call her.
exactly, exactly. I was annoyed. I actually went to her and I said, God, can you please dial direct? I've got enough on my plate right now. And she just was sort of laughing at that. But, she also knew we were in a very unusual relationship that was beyond our humanness. And because of our humanness, it was difficult to navigate. Um,
Absolutely.
so, yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
So, did you at any point think you were going insane? I mean, it must have been so strange to be getting these kind of messages. Did you ever think that maybe I'm going crazy? I don't know. I mean,
Of course, I
yeah,
thought it was strange.
right?
And frequently I question, am I going crazy? At the core, I'm a business school major.
Right.
There was not a class in spiritual awakening or divine messages. And if there was, I probably would have ditched it.
Yeah.
But from the time that they really began, from the time they would emerge in my mind,
Hmm.
they were so clear and they were so true, and they were benevolent. They led me, and I would get a piece of wisdom given to me that would change my perspective and become a pivotal part of the healing. Or I would get a direction, and within days that would happen, or something would emerge that would let me know that this was the right way to go. So it was miraculous. I mean, I was quite humbled by the entire
Did you
experience.
think that
Wow.
maybe your intuitiveness was just at a different level? You know what I mean? Was it more intuition or, like I said, intuitiveness as opposed to getting that direct, hey, girl, listen up?
That's a great question. And I've
Yeah.
actually never been asked that, but I think oddly, one of the things that happens when you're abused is you become very intuitive,
Mm.
especially when you feel like you're raising yourself.
Yeah.
You have to rely on an inner compass more than most, in a
Yeah.
way. And I do remember as a young child really honing that inner compass. So throughout my life, I knew if there was a wrong turn or a right turn, I would get a sense of it. I didn't always adhere to it.
Right.
I
Right.
made
Right.
turns that I thought, that I knew that I shouldn't have done that, but it was clear. So I think I did have a pretty well honed sense
Yeah.
of
A
intuition.
hyper awareness, right?
Yeah,
Just sort of
I
a,
mean, there's a hypervigilance with abuse.
yes.
There's also a hyper awareness and of intuition, and a sense of being guided, because you need that as a child. You're
Yeah.
feeling
So
alone, and
you
so
were
I
just
think
more open. You were more open to it anyway, which could have been a factor as to why you were being chosen for this. Not everybody is as open and intuitive,
I
right?
think as for for as emotionally closed that I was also very open from an intuitive standpoint. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's quite correct.
Yeah. That's what I got from the book as well. So, was there a turning point for you in this whole journey?
There were several, but I think one of the turning points that really has always stuck with me was, again, I don't want to reveal too much of the
No, no,
story,
please don't.
but there was an experience with Anne where I felt deeply rejected, like the maternal love that was nurturing me, that I was dependent on,
Mm-hmm.
was never going to love me again.
Yeah.
And that experience, and those current experiences just can trigger you. And I went from a 33-year-old and I was dropped right into my 5-year-old self.
Mm-mm.
And that 5-year-old had been raped, and my mother, in essence, had walked away from me.
Yeah.
And I was, pulled into the core of those feelings. And I was up all night just sobbing. I mean, 8 hours of sobbing into my blanket. And finally, when I was exhausted from the crying, I, rolled out of the fetal position that I had been in.
Right.
And I laid back on my back on the floor, and I was looking out a window as the sun was coming up, and the sky was starting to turn blue.
Mm-hmm.
And a message arose in my mind. And it said, love is not what you get from others, it's what you have for them.
Mm. That's big.
And I remember feeling a sense of just being released in that moment. It was really the first time in my life that I understood love as my own experience. And as my own experience, nobody could ever take it from me. It
Right.
was powerful. As long as I loved, I had loved.
That's a huge lesson.
It was a huge lesson. It was powerful. And I think that in that moment, I gained my own agency.
Mm.
Even my husband noticed a big shift in me that day.
Yeah. Let's talk about Jeff, or so he is called in the book. Um, he's a great character. I love Jeff, and I think Jeff would be a great husband for anybody because Jeff is so he doesn't question you. He's just like, yeah, I know this is happening to you. I'm supporting you. I'm here. But as it would with anybody else, it took a toll, right? It took a toll on him. And so, as supportive as he was still starting to act out because you were distancing him.
Mhm.
You were. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on here as well. He needed help too, right? And he believed you with Anne. When you told him how you felt so supported. I mean, I love Jeff. Let's talk
Let's
more about Jeff.
you know, Jeff's incredible.
Hmm.
And, he and I had been together since we were 15 years old. We knew each other from the 7th grade. And we just knew each other so well. And we knew
Yeah.
what each other was capable of. He never questioned that I was receiving a spiritual calling, nor
Hmm.
was he threatened by Anne. He knew she was a mother to me, and that I really needed to open my heart to her
Right.
in order to find myself and to figure out what the calling was about.
Mm.
We just knew each other. He was there. He supported me. He certainly acted out, uh, but yes.
Yeah. And he got a girlfriend, didn't
he, he did. So yes.
he?
One morning, after months of me dodging his sexual advances,
Hmm.
he announced to me that he was going to get a girlfriend.
And rightly so.
And rightfully so. And a few hours later, he came home with a dog.
Oh, I love that dog.
Yeah, she was actually a he, and we named him Max. So we both had our loves, and it was so special. When he comes home, the dog gets out, the dog's licking me, licking him, and he looked at me and he kissed me and he said, I'll wait for you as long as it takes.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, man, Jeff took my heart. He
Yeah,
did.
yeah, good guy.
So, in the beginning, the messages were more directly at you, right? To help you through your healing, to get to the point where you could be open to the bigger picture, right? So, the messages started to take on a universal kind of feel to it, right? So, how were those different for you? I mean, you were still hearing something, right?
They were very different. Towards the end of this emotional cleansing process,
Hmm.
awakening, whatever you want to call it, I went through a period where my consciousness was rapidly expanding.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'd had enough of the whole awakening thing. I was
Done.
seriously,
Thanks.
exactly. I was seriously praying for it to stop,
Yeah,
but instead it intensified.
right. This has been part one of a two-part interview with author Dawn Kohler. In part two, we'll talk more about the profound universal messages Dawn received and how she experienced them. To learn more about the messages, you can pick up the book where books are sold or go to Dawn's website at www.dawnkohler.com. Thanks for listening.